Okay. I'm good. All right, I'm good. Our next reader is a Philadelphia native. She'll receive her MFA in fiction from Rosemont College in 2019. She's previously been published in the Philadelphia Business Journal, Dickinson Review, and Albany Review. Her writing interests include Afrofuturism, speculative fiction, young adult romance, poetry, and creative nonfiction. In February 2018, she launched a blog, QueenKimberlyTheWriter.com, which includes personal musings on dope topics. Her future endeavors include publishing a novel, pursuing a PhD in prose, and becoming a creative writing professor. She currently teaches 9th grade English and lives with her 3 cats, Sassy, Soda, and Socks. Please welcome Kimberly Grandy.
"You're only going to make it worse by moving," Montecero said to her. Zora ignored him and rolled over again until she found a cooler patch of grass to count the stars. As she settled into slumber, a buzz lulled gradually into a rumble. Not loud enough or close enough to awaken the sleeping unicorns, yet loud enough to annoy. She hugged herself as she made out the sound and the shape in the sky. It was smaller than a dragon and more prominent than any other bird in the forest as it cut across the stars. The wings did not flap as the creature dipped low, glided above the trees grumbling, and dropped a fiery lowercase t, the height of an ogre, from the depths of its belly. It had been so long since she had read letters that she paused for a second to ponder why it was so wrong, so out of place. Then again, it wasn't a letter at all. It was a symbol. Something to do with the church she had attended oh so long ago. A cross. A burning cross. The wind emboldened the flames, awakening the nymphs, consuming their leaves. Zora shook Montecero's first, and together they alerted the Harris. The noisy creature disappeared, and the sky was black again before the trees became engulfed in orange flames, flickering and fluttering at full speed. Already the smell of smoke and the sound of screaming tree nymphs filled the air. Reem turned to Monteceros. "Take the Harris and head for the river. Your mother and I will warn the forest." To Zora he said, "Stay with your brother. If you see a human, you hide." "Okay," she said, with a nod, unable to take her eyes away from the flame. "Let's go," Montecero said. Zora climbed on his back, and Monteceros made a frantic rush to the river. All around them, the forest creatures galloped, slithered, or hopped ahead of the flame as it leaped from tree to tree, nymph to nymph. Quick-minded nymphs transformed into their human form and joined gnomes and elves as they hitched rides on unicorns. As fast as they moved, the smoke and the fire stalked them from behind, reaching out, burning. A hot, searing tongue of fire lapped at Zora's legs. Embers blew in the wind, setting an old tree nymph ablaze. Her bark blistered and crackled, splitting open as the nymph screeched. When the squealing ceased, the eerie silence was coupled with a wave of feverish warmth. For a moment, Zora recalled a distant memory. A kitchen with a stove and the rush of the heat of the door opened and how it filled the space. Only this oven was an inferno. She screamed as her thigh burned, and she struggled to pull in clean air. She leaned against Montecero's neck, beneath the smoke, to breathe. In haste, a nymph in between forms knocked Zora from her mount as skin and bark peeled back, exposing angry flesh. Zora flew from Monteceros and landed with a thud. Hooves threatened to trample her, so she rolled until her arms slammed into the trunk of a tree. She wrapped her hands around her knees, making her body into a small cluster of limbs in the hopes of not being pummeled in the stampede. In the flurry of feet, Paradisos and Monteceros called her name. Her lungs were so filled with smoke that she could not answer them. Flames grew around her, and there was a terrible screaming, almost as loud as the roar of the fire. She realized it was her voice when her throat was dry and gritty. Still, the wind blew, feeding the blaze and clearing enough gray smog to reveal the river. Sparks flew, igniting her frayed hem of her dress, igniting her hair. She tore the cloth from her body and ran for the water as the fire spread over her scalp. She ran in with the rest of the unicorns and woodland animals until her feet no longer touched the slippery rocks beneath. She turned back, only there were more animals swimming past her, and the fire was growing on land. Water filled her nose and her mouth as she grasped the tail of the nearest unicorn, only to have it slip through her fingers. sliding against the creases as she sank. Zora thrashed, forgetting all her summer lessons in the lakes with the water nymphs. The surface was murky and red above her as legs and hooves pushed her under. Her limbs were weak, and the more she fought, the further from the surface she remained. She struggled back against the desire to inhale, the pull on her lungs, the beat of her heart. It was too strong, and she was too far. A black bear yearling swam above her, its claws nearly grazing her head. She closed her eyes and prepared for the end. Just as she edged on the border of consciousness, she bolted to the surface of the water by a water nymph. Although her lungs burned, she was grateful for the fresh air. "You're safe, Zora," a water nymph said. A red glow from the fire exposed the woman's face in the water. Like a wave, she was carried safely to the other side of the river where the rest of the Harris rested. Other magical creatures were towed or washed ashore, splashing and sputtering and expelling water from flooded lungs. All the water nymphs gathered together and walked through the trees, dousing the flames. The steam from the fire rose into the dark sky, blocking the stars and the moonlight. When it was over, there was a clearing of blackened tree stumps littered with the gnarled bodies of creatures that did not flee fast enough. At dawn, Reem appeared, his black coat covered in gray ash, his mane burned almost down to the root. Some elf had wrapped Zora in a blanket. Reem stopped at every creature, kneeling to touch it with its horn and to bring it back to life. Monoceros pressed his horn to her head to heal the burn on her thigh and the fried, crispy rifts of fuchsia hair. Before too long, the entire Harris did the same. Each unicorn saved as many as they could before they too needed healing. So this story alternates views. So the next part I'm going to read is from Mikhail's view. So obviously the fire was set by someone, and the unicorns believe that it's humans. So he's now in the forest trying to find her, or trying to see what's going on. "Who did you find, you old flea parcel? Where's your brother?" Mikhail whispered. He jumped down from his unicorn and tied the leash to a branch. As quietly as his boots would permit, he followed the dog, too afraid to light a match and risk scaring off whatever was ahead. He strained his eyes in the darkness. He stumbled through the foliage and the crunching of the fodder louder than he wanted, and stumbled over a rotten log that crumbled under his weight. In turn, he startled the other missing hound and a very bright, very gorgeous, and very naked lady to their feet. His eyes swept upward in disbelief. The woman was tall, with long hair that curved in a manner that made them both soft and firm. There were tufts of pink hair at the peak of her thighs. Her breasts were fist-sized with large areolas that stared forward like dark brown eyes. Even though it was dark, an aura of light emanated from her skin, highlighting her angular face, high cheekbones, full lips, almond-shaped eyes, and the large pink fluff of hair that reached upward towards the stars. The crickets had stopped chirping, and the woman stood frozen. "Are you okay?" he asked. He asked even though he was on his back. He shielded his eyes against her nakedness. The girl brayed like a unicorn, blowing air through her lips and stomping her head. He slowly righted himself, keeping his eyes on her, as she kept her eyes on him with her legs set apart in a defensive stance. The girl turned her ear toward him, baring her teeth, and moved her neck back in a manner that was unnatural to a human. She backed up and then plowed toward him. Quick on his feet, Mikhail sidestepped her charge and wrapped his arms around her. She kicked him in the shin and elbowed him in the stomach, knocking him over and forcing him to free her. "I won't hurt you," he said in a calm voice reserved for children and small animals. He touched her elbow, hoping to pull her in close. She bucked, kicking him in the chest. Her elbow knocked into his chin, hard enough to make his teeth clatter and clip the tip of his tongue. The hot metal taste of blood filled his mouth, and he released her. The girl took off from the way he had come, stumbling over the same rotten log as he disappeared into the darkness. He spit blood and ran after her. Thank you.